Please raise the roof for Oleg.
All right. Okay, hey, good to be here. I realize I'm in a dangerous spot standing between you and the drinks you're about to enjoy, so I'll try and keep this pretty light. There's not going to be any live coding or, in fact, any slides with code whatsoever. And let's also try and make this interactive, so if you want to say something, kind of feel free to shout out, and we can pass the microphone around during the talk itself, rather than just afterwards. Before I start, though, I'm going to start the timer. I tend to get carried away with these things, so just make sure. OK. All right, that's good. Let me just start it anyway, just so that I don't. OK, good. OK, so my name's Oleg. I've been attending meetups for about 10 years and organizing them for about 5. That's kind of the intro part done. I'd like to get to know you a little bit. So how many of you here attend meetups regularly? All right. How many of you organize meetups? OK, nice. How many of you would like to organize meetups? OK, like a few hands. This talk is aimed at those few people. The rest can go. No, just kidding. OK, so what am I going to talk about? Just real brief. So I'm going to try and deconstruct what a meetup is and why it's a good thing, and then talk about the things that matter when it comes to meetups, which is the talks, the community, as well as the pitfalls to avoid. Because if you've never done a meetup before, I think it's pretty easy to get it wrong. Then, since this is a developer conference after all, I'm going to try and break down the process of running a meetup into an algorithm of sorts. So we'll have a checklist, and we'll go through that step by step. And finally, we're going to talk about experiments, i.e. the things that you can try and do to make your meetup special and fun. All right, so let's dive in. For those few of you that didn't raise your hands, in case you're wondering what a meetup is, it looks roughly like this. So it's a bunch of people getting together after work, oftentimes after work, and having short talks to discuss topics they're interested in. Okay? But let's kind of deconstruct what a meetup actually is. So what are the kind of key ingredients of a meetup? Would anyone care to just shout out the things? Speakers, all right, that's good. Subject, good. Beer, venue, okay. Okay. So you've kind of forgotten the most important prerequisite of all, which is that you also need organizers. You know, AI hasn't yet evolved to the stage where we can actually have AIs organizing meetups for us, but maybe one day. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So this is kind of the list that I got. So they are the dependencies, the things that you need to make a meetup happen, which is you need a topic. I have to say JavaScript is a great topic because JavaScript is like the English language of programming languages, right? Nobody particularly maybe likes it or knows it that well, but everyone speaks it. So it's the lingua franca of development. But you can go more niche. So you can have a talk about a specific framework, for example, or you can have meta topic. So a topic about other topics, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, the other thing you definitely need is an organizer, right? You need someone to MC these things so that they happen regularly, right? And related to that, something that the previous speaker mentioned is motivation, right? You need to have a reason for doing this in the first place. In my experience, meetups that have had a very commercial agenda from the beginning, where essentially someone was just trying to promote something, don't tend to do as well. Meetups where you have passion, you have a genuine interest in the topic, but more importantly, you have an interest in getting to know other people that are also interested in the topic. That tends to be by far the best motivator in my experience. Okay, so those are the things you need before you do an event, but what are the things that make up the event? And I think all 3 were mentioned. So you need sponsors, you need, or hosts, I guess as some of you call, some of you may call them. So basically, someone to provide a venue, a place where you meet. Then you need speakers to give talks, and then you need the attendees to actually attend the events. So out of those three, which one do you think is the most important one? You can shout out. Speakers? Okay. Exactly. Right? So there's a reason I kind of listed them in reverse order. I honestly think that the attendees are by far the most important thing. Speakers are kind of nice to have. I'd like to think that you're all here because of me and my colleagues, but you know, and then there's sponsors. But to be honest, like the speakers you don't need, because you can try different formats where there are no speakers. And you don't actually need sponsors either, because you can just go down to the pub and meet people there. Without further ado, let's then dive into what a meetup actually looks like. And I think there's, you know, there might be some scope for disagreement here, because I know that in different countries, people do things differently. So this is kind of the very opinionated part of the talk. In my experience, you want to organize meetups after work hours, not before work, probably not during work, and not on weekends. So, for example, in Helsinki, where I run a couple of meetups, you know, 6 p.m. is a good time, because people tend to finish work around 5, and it gives them time to get to the venue. You know, in Moscow, I guess 7 is where people start. Other cities are maybe different, but you know, kind of quite late in the afternoon, early evening, but not too late. So when it comes to days of the week, what are the best days of the week? What do you think? Tuesdays. Tuesdays are good. Thursdays are good too. Friday, okay. Why Friday? So that's the thing. On Friday, you're like competing with house parties. You're competing with family time. You're competing with people going off to the summer cottage for the weekend. I think Fridays are a bit risky, to be honest. Yeah, I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday work really well. Mondays can also sometimes work, but the problem is on Monday, people are still recovering from the weekend and a bit depressed about all the work they're going to have to do during the week. So it's quite unlikely that they're going to show up. That being said, in Helsinki, we do have an event called Metrics Monday, which is organized on every first Monday of the month, and they seem to have had a good number of attendees, so I wouldn't completely rule Monday out, but you know, Tuesday to Thursday work well. Okay, so then we come to the actual format of the event, right? You know, how long should it last? How many speakers should you have? How long should the talks be? And given what I said earlier about, you know, talks and speakers not being the reason, or well, it may be the reason why people show up, but it's certainly not the reason why people stay. And given the fact that at meetups, you tend to have a lot less vetting of the speakers, unlike the rigorous vetting that we've had at this conference. You know, at a meetup, at least at the meetups that I run, pretty much anyone can rock up. So I prefer to keep the talks quite short, like 20 minutes and 5 minutes for questions. And I don't like having too many talks. So if we have 2, great. If we've got 3, nice, but certainly not more than 4. All right? It's good to have a break somewhere in between. But the key thing is to leave some room for the attendees, for the community members to mingle and chat to one another. That's like super, super important, right? You know, different countries do it differently. So in Finland, we, for example, tend to start a bit late because people show up late. I think most meetups do, you know, they announce a certain time, but they tend to start at least 15 minutes after that. And then we have the talks, and then sometime during the talks, during a break, for example, you know, you get food, drinks, and then we leave at least an hour for people to hang around the same venue and talk to one another. In the US, for example, it works the other way, right? So you actually get the food first, and it's like an hour for networking and mingling. And then you hear the talks, and the talks are done, and everyone leaves. I don't know, maybe it's like a cultural thing, but in Finland, people need a bit of time with one another before they can start interacting, so that works better. And another reason that this works well, in my experience, is that what I've noticed in the US is that people actually just come for the food. So they eat the food, they don't talk to anyone, and then just leave. So at least in Finland, you have to pay for that food by having to suffer through the talks, or maybe not suffer, but you get the idea. Anyway, and that's really it. There isn't much more to it, right? So with this in mind, though, let's first talk about the talks and the speakers. I sort of said that it's not important, and I honestly do believe that. I think that for the attendees, it's much more important to chat with one another, and the talks are more like conversation starters. But for the speakers that give talks at meetups, I honestly believe that it's a very important thing for them, and there's a few reasons for it. The first reason is, well, there's been some research which sort of found out that people are actually more afraid of public speaking than they are of death. So in some sense, for the majority of people, coming up on stage like this and giving a talk is sort of equal to conquering the fear of death. And I guess being the last speaker at a conference is a little bit like being on death row. You can see it coming, but you gotta see the other people do it first, go through it first. But another reason why I think meetups are very important for speakers is because maybe hopefully we've got most of the speakers from today's conference today, but could all the speakers from today raise their hands, please? All right, so keep your hands up. So out of the speakers today, how many of you first gave a talk at a meetup? All right, I think I saw a single hand go up, right? So no one just rocks up to JSConf and is like a star. I think maybe the only person was Ryan Dahl when he announced Node.js. But, and probably not even him. So you need, the only way to get over the fear, the only way to get better is to iterate on your talk. And for that, you need practice, right? And where are you going to practice if not at some smaller event? Or in fact, multiple smaller events, so you can eventually give a talk at a conference, right? So, with that in mind, and also to encourage other people, what we do at Helsinki.js is we keep the barrier to entry for giving talks very low. So we don't ask you to show any slides to us. In fact, I think I've let people on stage without even asking what the topic of the talk is going to be. And as a result, we've had some really, really bad talks. Right? I guess this is being recorded, so I'm not going to name any names, but we've had some talks where no one understood what had been said. But that's okay. That's totally fine, because what that does is that it encourages other people who maybe have contemplated giving a talk, and there is something that they're really passionate about, but have this fear of speaking, and makes them think, hey, that guy was so bad, I could do at least a little bit better than that, and then it encourages new people to participate. Right? And that's something that you should really try and get people to do. Right? The other thing is you should try and encourage people to have interactive talks, right? Because that's the way to get feedback and understand which part of your talk actually is resonating with the audience. And the last thing is, at least I find, oftentimes not everyone can make it to the event, and also you want to show to potential new speakers what a good deck of slides looks like. Or even maybe show a recording of a previous talk. So having some sort of an archive, it can be as simple as just tweeting out the links to the videos and the slides, right? But if you've got other tools, maybe like a wiki or a GitHub page or whatever, just archive those talk materials somewhere. I think it's also really important. Okay, so this is a photo from an event, or from Helsinki.js that took place earlier this week. On Tuesday, I believe. And this is a photo of the event like 5 minutes before it was supposed to start. We are, well, at least I'd like to think we're the biggest developer community in the whole country. But this time, I kind of really messed things up. I had way too much work on, so I announced the meetup the day before. So here I was thinking, is anyone actually going to show up? As it turned out, the elevator at the venue was broken, and and all the attendees being developers rather than just using the stairs. They were all trying to fix the elevator by pressing the button a whole bunch of times. I guess it's that whole, I'll restart it or press enough buttons and it'll eventually start working type of mindset. Anyway, and then they all kind of turned up at the same time, and we had a great event. But, there are still certain mistakes you can make, which I've made. I think I've made all of them in the 5 to 6 years I've been running meetups that I think you should try and avoid. There's a very long list, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. But there's some very basic ones that I think are worth mentioning. So the first one is, I kind of already touched upon it, is you shouldn't have like a very commercial agenda, right? So if you yourself are representing a company and every talk starts with you talking about how great your company is and how many people you're trying to hire, that's not a good thing. But you can also kind of make the same mistake by not necessarily being an employee of the company, but by always having the same sponsor, i.e. the same venue. So when we started Moscow.js in Moscow, we quickly found Yandex, which is kind of like the Russian Google, to be our sponsor. And what happened was they did the first event, things went really smoothly, then we're like, okay, well, we got to do another one. We can't be bothered looking for other sponsors. So Yandex was our second sponsor, third sponsor, and I think towards the end we had like 40–50% of the attendees being Yandex employees. And then our contact person at Yandex left. We couldn't reestablish the relationship with them. We tried to go find other sponsors, and they said, but aren't you kind of the Yandex meetup? Why should we be sponsoring you? And we had a really hard time kind of regaining that momentum that we lost as a result. So I have a rule, which is that I don't let any single sponsor/venue host an event within a 12-month window, right? So, and always try and get new ones whenever possible. And it's kind of crazy, the kind of companies and organizations that are willing to sponsor. So, in Helsinki, for example, the part of the government that handles welfare and kind of social benefits and stuff has hosted meetups, for example. And there's companies doing defense, kind of building weapons that host meetups. All sorts of crazy entities are actually all keen to get the word out about the fact that actually, yes, they are writing using JavaScript, and yes, somebody needs to actually write that JavaScript, and so please come work with us, kind of a thing. Other mistakes to make. Not timing the talks, which is why I'm timing myself twice here, just to be certain that I don't go over the time limit, because. If you don't time the talks, then that typically eats into the time that you have for networking afterwards. And like I said, that's the most important part. So you got to time the talks. And in order to be able to time the talks, you need to let the speakers know in advance that the talks will be timed. Again, that's a mistake that we've made when we had a speaker from the sponsor that we hadn't told about the fact that the talk was only supposed to be 20 minutes, and he went on for an hour, I kid you not. And that happened once, and the next year we had that same company sponsoring again, and the same thing happened a second time. So now we make sure we time the talks. Not only do we time the talks, we also use the iPhone alarm, which makes this very annoying sound when the timer's out. And then you can just sort of leave that on and point at it and say, hey, it's not me telling you to stop, it's this gadget here. And eventually, even the most persistent speakers are going to stop talking. Those are kind of the basic things. I suppose there's a bunch of other things that can go wrong. But one topic I'd like to kind of emphasize, fortunately, I haven't run into it too much with the JavaScript meetups, but it has happened at a DevOps meetup I attended. That topic is negativity, right? So sometimes, either in real life or at the hold on, it's Linux doing its thing, and me forgetting to turn on the screensaver. So there was a talk organized, there was a talk given by the organizer of the meetups, and at the last minute he decided to actually change the topic. So he's actually heckled by one of the attendees, and he was told, this isn't what you promised to talk about, why are you talking about something completely different? And other times you get kind of this passive-aggressive stuff on Twitter or on social media. And I really think that, meetups, these kind of grassroots developer communities should be a place for positive encouragement, positive reinforcement. So it's your job as the organizer to be the moderator and sort of cut that negativity at its root. And the best way to do it is just to outright say, this isn't nice, stop doing that. Oh yeah, and then there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is setting a hard attendee limit. Like, you're always going to get more people signing up than you actually will have attending. People cancel for all sorts of reasons, and it's very hard to get them to cancel their ticket in the last moment. And even if they do, then chances are someone who would have liked to attend already has made other plans for that day and is not going to be able to make it. So in the case of Helsinki.js, I oversubscribe by about a third. And you need to figure out what that amount is, but that's a good practice. I also think that quite a lot of people just rock up without a ticket, right? I think there's something exciting about that. It's kind of like trying to get into a bar when you're not 18 yet. So I don't know, how many of you here confess to having attended a meetup without ever having a ticket? Okay, yeah, let's see how many of you confess after a few drinks. But anyway, that's kind of the pitfalls there. But like I said, I've got a lot more to avoid, so come chat to me afterwards. And let's get to the most important part of it, which is the community. Like, what are the things that you can do to make the community work well? And I think it really boils down to a few things. People tend to have the tendency to always gravitate towards the people they already know. And that's fine. In fact, I think that's a big part of what makes up a community. People know one another. But at the same time, I think it's also very important to be inclusive to new people joining the community. So what I try and do is try and introduce people at meetups. So if I know that someone's mentioned to me that they're working on technology X, I tell them, hey, there's someone else you should talk to who's also here, or I can introduce you through Facebook chat or whatever, and get people to talk to one another. I think that's super important. The other thing is sort of taking that communication from the real-world interactions you have online. Like, a lot of people write blogs, a lot of people do open source projects, and with Helsinki.js, we've got a Facebook group where any community member can just go and post a link to some blog post they wrote, or link to the GitHub project, and I think that's really good too. Right, and the last thing is people coming and going. I haven't really cracked this one yet, but I would like if someone messages me and says, hey, I couldn't get the tickets because they went to Helsinki.js because they went in 10 minutes, like they always do, not to brag or anything, but but I've never been, I'd like to attend, then I usually tell them, yeah, if it's your first time, you're more than welcome. I think it's great to see new faces, and I try and encourage first-timers to attend whenever possible. Okay, so I promised, since this is a developer conference, I know that we as developers like to reduce things to kind of repeatable algorithms that can be just automated without us having to do too much work. So here's a checklist. If any of you are now thinking that, hey, maybe I could do a meetup, basically just take this slide, and I guess these will be shared somewhere afterwards, and go through this one step at a time and check each of the boxes. So first you need a name, okay? If there isn't a JS meetup in your town, then that is kind of easy. It's the name of your city, JS. Make sure you use JS and not JavaScript, because JavaScript is a trademark of Oracle Corporation, and they will probably sue you if you do that. The other thing is, also try and come up with kind of a recognizable name, right? There's a meetup in, and a non-offensive name. There's like a meetup in Finland that got started recently, which is, should we do something about that feedback? Oh, okay, we're good. So there's a meetup in Finland that got started called Web Dev and Sausages. That's probably not, I'm not sure what they were aiming for, and it certainly got everyone's attention, but I think it's probably not the best name to have, because, one of these events, you might run out of sausages, and you may want to do like steaks or something instead. So pick a name. Then I think it's good to start online. Facebook groups are probably by far the easiest to get going. So basically, you just start a Facebook group, invite your friends that you think will be interested in this topic, and ask them to invite more friends. Once you get about 20 people in your group, then you know that there's enough of like a critical mass of people to get an event going, right? Then you ask those same people in that same group or in a chat, whatever it is, would anyone like to host the first event, and would anyone like to give a talk? Oftentimes, the sort of company hosting is also the one that would like to promote themselves more than just by having their logo at the beginning of the event. So oftentimes, they also want to have a speaker. So in a way, you have only one other speaker that you need to find to get an event going, right? But this is important. And this is something that I literally did not do for about 3 years. But you should keep a list of interested sponsors and interested speakers. Because, when it rains, it pours. Like 1 month, no one wants to give a talk. Next month, everyone wants to give a talk. 1 month, no one wants to sponsor. Next month, you have like 6 sponsors all saying, hey, can we host you next month? So a spreadsheet, for example, works really well for that, right? So once you have one sponsor with one speaker plus one speaker, pick a date, open up registration. Another important bit, you can use a platform like meetup.com, or you can handle it through like a Facebook event. But in the long run, you want to be able to communicate with your community. And email is by far the best way to do that. So I strongly recommend that sooner rather than later, you start handling registrations through a platform that A, allows you to limit the number of attendees and have a wait list, and B, a platform that lets you collect their emails, right? Then once you handle registrations, you actually have the event, and rinse and repeat, right? And then try and do another event as soon as possible, or like a month after that, whatever the frequency it is that you decide to be. And every time you do an event, try and improve at least one thing about it. So try and make it just that little bit better based on your learnings from the previous one. Okay. To get a meetup off the ground, it often takes about at least 6 months. So you have to realize that doing events is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And in order to keep the community going, you need to organize these events regularly. So you need to have the motivation, the passion to do these events, and the strength to do these events, not for a short period of time, but for a very long period of time, right? And as a result, at least what works for me has been to minimize the amount of effort required, right? And it really boils down to this. So try and standardize things. So have templates for emailing instructions to speakers and sponsors. Don't get involved in the details, like of choosing the types of sandwiches that should be served at your event. I kid you not, I've had conversations spanning 50 emails about what kind of catering to have at an event. Try and avoid that at all costs. Keep a list of sponsors and speakers. And the most important thing really is try not to stress about it. So it should not feel like a job, right? Try and keep it fun, and if it starts feeling like a job, then either decrease the frequency, do them every couple of months, try and get some help from the community, or then try and do some work to minimize the amount of effort required, right? And then one last thing that you can do is experiment, right? So if you have that base level that it takes you 30 minutes, maybe an hour tops, a month to put a meetup together, then you actually will have the time and the bandwidth to do fun things. And there's a ton of fun stuff you can do, right? So out of the people here that have organized events, just if each one of you could just shout out an example of a fun thing that you've done. All right, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else? Barbecue, nice. We've done brunches with families. So on a weekend we meet up just for brunch and invite the family members along. Any others? Video invitation. So how does that work?
I upload short movie on YouTube.
Yeah.
With agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Couple of days before event.
Okay. That sounds nice. Yeah. We've experimented quite a bit with video. So we've done stuff like live streaming. Once we streamed the whole event where actually the speaker was upside down, but that's why it's called an experiment, right? Another thing we did was we actually set up like a video link with Madrid, if I remember correctly. Because you have to realize, a lot of people out there in the world do JavaScript, so you're not part of a local community, you're also part of a global community. And if you think about it, if there's like 180 meetups, and there's only 3 days per week when you can do events, if you do the math, there's at least like 5 to 10 events taking place on that very same day. 5 to 10 other meetups. And most of them, or some of them, are likely to be in the same time zone, so that's a fun thing to try out as well. Yeah, and then the thing about videos also is that the sponsors are more than happy to record the videos and pay for them to be professionally edited. So that's a really good thing to do as well. Any other experiments? So one thing that we've done, well, Beer.js is kind of an obvious one. If you can't find a sponsor, then you just meet up for beers, and you call it Beer.js. Other stuff, for example, that we've done, which has kind of been a bit of giving back to the wider community, is something called peer programming. So the idea is that you're going to have, an event from, like, say, 6 or 7 p.m. onwards with 100 professional software developers that have been doing this stuff for a living for at least a few years. And there's a huge number of people that are actually interested in getting into programming, right? But don't actually have any friends that they can kind of learn with. So peer programming was basically a way to remedy that. So we paired up people that didn't know how to program at all with people that knew how to program in another programming language, with a third person that was actually doing JS for a living. And we kind of had little tasks that they worked on together for a couple of hours before the main event. And then that was really, really good, but an effort to organize. Hence, we're not doing them, at least for the time being. Right, anyway, so all this boils down to is that events should be fun, right? So try and keep the fun in them, whichever way you can. And I guess one last thing I'd like to say is that the way in which Helsinki.js got started was actually at a conference much like this one, where I randomly bumped into someone from Helsinki, and this was while I was just planning to move to Helsinki. I hadn't actually moved there. And then after the main talks, we sort of connected over beers, and we said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if there was a JavaScript meetup in Helsinki? And a couple of months later, the first event took place at Henry's offices, and at the end of this year, we'll be celebrating 5 years running meetups. So hopefully you're going to stick around afterwards, chat to one another, find out that there's a topic that you find interesting, and actually try and put a meetup of your own together. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.